Yo guys, it's JJ here, and today I'm going to be walking you through how to make a key Glock beat, especially for his new album that just released called Glockoma 2. Super dope Memphis album. Love Key Glock's work. So before we get into this, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. We are on the way for 1,000 subs. Honestly, all the support is appreciated. We are really pushing it, so I really appreciate it. And last but not least, we got some free drum kits down below, different styles, and I'm constantly updating this list that I've made. So if you want them, go grab them, link in the description, and let's just get into this. So first things first with this beat, I am using a preset from Contact, the Noir piano. Everyone knows it, we love it, but obviously you could just use some other piano of yours. And as you guys can see, this is the chord progression I've laid down, but this is in the BPM of 134, that nice little Memphis range. And I'm doing this in the key of D sharp minor. So when it comes down to the chord progression, it's essentially quite simple, but I'm gonna walk you through it. First things first, we got ourselves these nice little root notes, of course, copying and pasting them upwards and upwards again. But the reason I got this nice little beat going down here is because it's 5 semitones lower, going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down into the A sharp. Nice little way of getting a nice little melody going, so that's why I did that. Then as you guys can see, I've got this nice little A sharp playing as well, constantly throughout the whole thing. I laid this down as part of the lower octaves because I felt like it really added a bit of tension, and as you can see, it is part of the note's intention, which just gives it a darker vibe if you guys didn't know. But focusing purely on the first chord progression, as you can see, we've got ourselves this nice little chord I built here. It's kind of like a weird minor chord, but I just messed about with it initially because I had it something like this, kept it up here, and then this is essentially just a minor chord but without the last note on top, as you guys can see. And we've got a lot of these notes going through here that are part of the little tension vibe, again I've just stated before. And then for the first chord, all I actually did was just go onto the slicing tool, as you can see here, clicking shift and drag, I just sliced these little notes going through here and here, and that's how I got this nice little like kind of cascading effect occurs throughout this progression. As for the second chord, it's essentially the same one repeated, except I add this nice little note down here. You know, having two notes apart also gives it a bit of a dark vibe. Note being part of this nice little like semitone apart note thing, again more darker vibes. Took this note down one semitone, again more darker vibes. You really see the theme of this, a lot of dark vibes here. And then we've got a nice little roll cascading down. Then for the third chord, essentially copy and paste to the first one. And for the last one, as I just said before, doing A sharp, A sharp, A sharp, and then I've got this nice little note going here on F, A sharp again. And then this chord progression, as you can see right here, this little chord, actually, a lot of notes from the notes in tension, especially these two, as you can see here. And it really fulfills that whole kind of dark vibe, and it sounds amazing. But then the last things I really did to make this sound more human and authentic, I went through every single chord, highlighted them individually, clicked Alt-S, allowing it to strum, and then adjusting them differently depending on how I wanted it to sound. And then the final thing I did was click Alt-R on all of the chords and just played with the velocity, as you guys can see here, making it sound more human, the notes sound much more natural. And without further ado, this is what the main chord progression sounds like for the beat. And there we have it. Super dark, super vibey, nice little Memphis vibe, of course. So let's move on to the effects. As you guys can see, we've got ourselves a very basic EQ, cutting off all the lows and a few of these unwanted frequencies. Next up, a bit of reverb, not too heavy, but just enough to make it noticeable, you know, giving a bit of ambience to the piano. And then last but not least, I stereo separated this around 27%, just to widen it in the mix, not super in your face. Next up, we got ourselves another instance of Contact, and I'm using the bank called Vocalize 3, Gravity Pack 8, and I'm using this little preset here. As you guys can see, it's quite straightforward, but I just got these nice little vocal phrases playing across. Pretty simple, straightforward, but this is what they sound like. And there we have it. As you can see, Key Glock likes to use a lot of vocals within his melodies, so I thought let me add some vocals in myself. But as for the effects, from what you can see, we've got this nice little telephone EQ, really drowning out a lot of the frequencies, keeping the vocal kind of in the distance, but as you could obviously hear, it's still quite apparent that it's there. Then on top of that, I added a very heavy amount of Valhalla vintage verb from the high decay, the high mix, low pre-delay. And of course, I just did a little bit of a low cut to cut off all of that reverb in the low end. And finally, I stereo separated 100%, so if you're wearing these bad boys, which I'm obviously calling headphones, you'll be able to hear the difference. It's really nice, makes it a nice little bit of a contrast in the sense of layering your instruments. So I really recommend giving it a listen with headphones. Next up, we got ourselves an instance of Analog Lab 5, and I'm using a preset called the Kid Dukes. Essentially, it's kind of like a bell slash a poly synth, a mix of those two things. But all I really did was just follow the D sharp and then going back and forth between these notes, rinsing it literally throughout the whole thing, and then just going back up and then back down to give it a nice little dark vibe, as you guys can see here. But without further ado, this is what the melody sounds like. And there we have it. A nice little bit of ambience added from the bells, a very nice little layer. Again, it's not too in your face, but I think it did a really good job. And from the effects, you could obviously hear I used some gross beats, of course a halftime preset. Then I added my EQ, as you guys can see here, all the lows being cut off and a few of these highs being ducked. Added a bit of 3D fast distortion, but just really kept it on the default preset, ducked and mixed down to a very low mix. And then a fair amount of reverb, as you guys can see from the Valhalla Vintage Verb, and these are the presets that I kind of put on. And of course, last but not least, stereo separated the sound around 50%, just to widen it in the mix, you know, again, giving it a bit more ambience, a bit more stereo separation. Once again, using Analog Lab 5, I have got myself another preset, but it's a bass and it's called the Source preset, and this is from my bank. Well, not my bank, but the artillery bank that I've got on my Analog Lab 5. And as you can see, all I did was follow the root notes and having them cut off at this little point here, just because I thought it'd give it a little bit of tension. It's a nice little bit of rhythm to the whole thing. So without further ado, this is what the bass sounds like. There we have it. Last but not least, all I did was render out the whole melody, and as you guys can see, took it up 300 cents, which means 3 semitones. So the melody shifted now from a D sharp minor up to an F sharp minor. And without further ado, this is what the sample sounds like. And there we have it. Super dope melody. I'm a really big fan of it, and I can really hear Key Glock over this, so super proud of it. But now let's just get into the drums. So first things first, we got ourselves the clap pattern. As you guys can see, very simple, straightforward. So let me move on to the hi-hats. So now we're on to the hi-hats. This is the pattern I came up with, but as I've previously stated in many videos, it's essentially just a 4-bar but looped over. So as you guys can see, I went onto the magnet tool, clicked quarter step, right click, drag the mouse wheel till I hit this little paintbrush without the plus, click a regular hi-hat, and all I do is just draw these in. So using the quarter step, I drew this one in, and just drew like a little cascading step effect, as you guys can see over here. This is more of a half step roll, but I just individually just clicked them in. Then played with the pitch, and then what I did here was just drag notes across, right click, and then drag it down, as you can see, lowering the velocity and creating this nice little effect. And that's all I really did. It just repeated itself every 4-bar, then creating that 8-bar loop. So it sounds really good. And without further ado, this is what the clap and hi-hat sound like. Oh yeah, this is what obviously the hi-hat and clap sounded like, but I obviously had these nice little notes down here, which I completely forgot existed. Now, of course, the 808. As you can see, quite a simple pattern in my opinion. It's essentially this 4-bar loop, but I can't take it over and then just layer it down. So pretty straightforward in my opinion, but as you can see, nice little pattern going here. Repeat it again, but I have this nice little extra note coming in, you know, that variety. Again, rinse and repeat, take it down 5 semitones to the C. And what I did was insert this little sliding note from the C sharp, and I just dug the velocity to 0. And when this plays now and I show you it, you'll know exactly what it sounds like. Then, as well as that, with the kick pattern, it's essentially just the 808 pattern layered in the kick pattern, as you can see, following the same rules. And one thing I did for both of these, which is maxing my velocities out. What that means is when you go on your kick or your 808, click Control A and use your right scroller wheel to max the velocity out, as you can see from the bottom over here. What that does is it makes your kick and your 808 hit much harder, gives it a nice hip hop sound, sounds more Detroit, sounds more Memphis, sounds more rap in general, makes it better for producers that hear your beats, makes it better for artists that hear your beats. So honestly, take this one on board. But with all that being said, this is what the 808 and kick sound like together. And there we have it. And as you guys can obviously hear, that nice little dope 808 sliding effect down to no sound. Super dope way to end that loop. Next up, we got ourselves this nice little cross that I've inserted at the start of every 8 bar, just giving it a nice little bit of a sound, you know what I mean? It just sounds dope. And last but not least, we got ourselves a snare pattern, and essentially it just repeats every 2 bar. As you can see, I've laid it down quite simple. And when I placed this little pattern here, I dug the velocity of the second snare down just to give it a bit more of a bounce and a vibe. But at the very end of the 8 bar, I add a third one and I just further decrease the velocity. Again, to do so, let's just assume your velocities are standard. All you have to do is highlight and drag, use your right scroller wheel and drag them down. So without further ado, this is what the beat sounds like together as a whole. And there we have it, super dope beat. But before we finish this off, let's go through the arrangement. So this may look a bit difficult, but it's essentially quite simple. And the way I start this off is, got a crash with the intro, the bass, the vocals and the keys playing, you know, giving it a nice little intro vibe. That's how we do it. Got the tag coming in, and then we got the 2 8-bar chorus, which is essentially just a 16-bar chorus. First part, pretty much got all the drums playing apart from the snares, and the main piano is playing. Second part of the chorus, I introduced a nice little like polysynth bell that I've got going, alongside the snare being introduced. Now we are into the verse. As you see here, quite simple, straightforward, 3 8-bar loops, giving us a nice 24-bar verse. Starting off with the introduction of the verse, we kind of taken out the 808s, introduce a new instrument here, the strings. Then coming into the heavy chunk of the actual verse, I add in the kick with the 808, making it hit a bit harder. Then I added another sound, which is again that polysynth bell. And then for the last section of the verse, I like to call this like the pre-chorus or the pre-hook, because it kind of indicates to the artist that, okay, this is building up back into the actual, you know, hook. So got ourselves pretty much all of the elements playing together, the vocals, the keys, the bass, the polysynth. And then all I really did was just drag it all and just copy and paste it over, getting again the same chorus. Then at the end, of course, we got the same verse structure, but at the end for the pre-hook, I just add this nice little clap and kick that comes in halfway through the 8 bar, you know, building it up again to the hook. And then last but not least, we got ourselves the chorus once again. You've made it to the end of the tutorial. I really hope you've enjoyed it. If you got any suggestions for videos, leave it down below. Again, make sure to subscribe and like the video. Highly appreciate it. And of course, thanks for watching. Peace.